Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Backlog Bunker. This week is kind of Konami focused, and I don't mind that necessarily, but it's at the cost of a lot of my sanity, so we'll see how that goes. First things first, I actually don't have much to talk about in terms of gameplay this week, because I mostly played XCOM, and that's not a good thing. But I did play a lot of Metal Gear Solid Delta, and I finally finished it on stream. Unfortunately, I wish I had more to say about it than it was Metal Gear Solid 3, but not as good. As a video game, it plays just fine. If anything, I had an easier time playing Delta than I did the original Metal Gear Solid 3, because I had a much easier time on Delta's bosses, despite the fact that I was playing on a higher difficulty than I ever played Metal Gear Solid 3 on. But as an experience, it offers basically the same thing Metal Gear Solid 3 did, except it's slightly worse because there's crouch walking, and the game looks really ugly, and the camera's really bad. And all of that is made worse by the fact that the game costs $70, so now I'm expected to pay more for a worse version of Metal Gear Solid 3. The only thing Delta kind of has over the original is that it has the Fox Hunt mode, except it didn't have that at launch, which is why I've never played it. If Konami's answer to not having Kojima anymore is to just remake Metal Gear games until they run out, this is not a good start, because it tells me that A, they're willing to overprice these things, and B, they're willing to not finish them. I've said for a long time that I want remakes of the original 2 Metal Gear games, but at this point, I'm not sure if Konami could. I'm not sure if they still know how to make a real video game, which we will mention later when it comes to state-of-play stuff. But for now, I'm not really happy with Konami's output, but at least Konami has an output, so the things are technically on the up. Which brings us to the state of play, and instead of talking about the whole thing, I'm only going to talk about the parts I cared about, which was really none of it, except for the Konami part. I must reiterate, I am proud of Konami for having an output. I'm just not excited for all of these games, on top of the fact that I'm not exactly happy with what was revealed. Starting with the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, Volume 2. It's finally here, and Metal Gear Solid 4 is finally out of PS3 jail, at the cost of being in a really overpriced package. For a long time, I had it in my head that if Volume 2 ever came out, it was going to include 4, Peace Walker, and Portable Ops, because while the only relevant games are 4 and Peace Walker, it would be kind of a scam to release Volume 1 with 3 games and then release Volume 2 with only 2. Especially since one of those 2 games is a portable game, and not even a very good one. Does this mean Volume 2 is an absolute no-buy? No, not necessarily. Like I said, it's great to have Metal Gear Solid 4 off the PS3 jail, and despite the fact that Peace Walker isn't very good, at least the multiplayer is coming back, and that's something I never got to experience, so that's actually pretty exciting. I'm just not interested in paying $60 for it, assuming they only price it at $60. For some perspective, I'm probably going to end up buying Volume 1 a second time so I can have it physically on console, while Volume 2 will be lucky if I get it on a good sale. Luckily, that's not the only thing Konami was up to. They also made an Octopus game. And they also made Silent Hill Townfall. And then there's also this anime game called Rev Noir. But Castlevania is coming back, so that's the important part. However, it turns out that when I asked for a new Castlevania game, the monkey's paw curled really hard. So it's not a Castlevania game, it's a Metroidvania game. The difference is that when I say I want a Castlevania game, what I mean is that I want an action platformer. What I don't mean is a game with a big ass map that you have to keep backtracking through. And I understand that this genre is what Castlevania is known for nowadays. In fact, I'm not even surprised this is a Metroidvania. This kinda checks out. Obviously they would make one in this oversaturated genre. It's oversaturated for a reason. But it feels a little bit targeted when this game is being developed by Motion Twin, who developed Dead Cells, a game I really like a lot, and one of the few roguelites I've ever been able to enjoy. And so, Motion Twin went on from making a game in a genre that I don't like to making a game in a genre that I don't like. The most positive outcome that I could draw from this is that this will end up being the Metroidvania that I'm able to enjoy. But much like Dead Cells, I guarantee you that even if I do end up liking it, the entire time I'm just going to be going, this game would have been better if it wasn't a Metroidvania. Cause no matter what, I just cannot enjoy this genre. I don't think I ever mentioned it on the bunker, but I did try Hollow Knight a few weeks ago, and I wasn't a fan. At the end of the day, it's just not for me, which is why it annoys me so much that this is what Castlevania has become, and will probably be for the foreseeable future. And now we move on to the weekly topic, which I sure do hope I have footage for, because I didn't record any before talking about it. That being the recent Twitter arguments about the EXP share in Pokemon, and whether or not it's overtuned, or even necessary in the first place. First things first, my opinion on the EXP share has always been that it's better than not having it. Because as someone who has played multiple of the old Pokemon games, both for Nuzlocke and for normal playthroughs, I have never once had my gameplay experience heightened by the fact that I had to constantly be switching in my Pokemon to get them EXP that otherwise they wouldn't be getting. I would compare it to Final Fantasy II, in which the way to get your health up and other certain stats are to be doing a bunch of things that you otherwise would not want to be doing. You are punished for playing Final Fantasy II too well, because if you don't lose a lot of health in fights, then you're not going to be getting your health stat up, meaning in later fights, you're going to have a hard time surviving anything because you won't have any health. Meaning, you're going to have to end up doing grinding just to get your health stat up. And I'm of the opinion that any RPG that promotes grinding is an RPG that isn't very confident in its own gameplay systems. To bring this back to Pokemon, despite the fact that I am in favor of the EXP share, admittedly, my recent Pokemon exploits have shown me that it's a little bit more complicated than just grinding or not grinding. As is usually the case when it comes to Pokemon fans, I'm fairly confident that most, if not everyone engaged with this argument, has not actually played multiple Pokemon games in a very long time. And for the few people who actually have, they are, for lack of a better term, pretty simple-minded and unable to critically analyze any video game if they had a gun to their head. When I played Pokemon White, I didn't really have any problem with levels. However, this is for two reasons. One was because I was playing White unlike I had played previous Pokemon games, in that I was trying to catch every Pokemon that I came across, so I was regularly getting EXP from that, on top of the fact that I never ever ran away from a random encounter. I always fought them. Because of this, even despite catching new Pokemon along the way that I would add to my team, I was still able to have pretty normal levels across the board for the rest of the game. The only exception being Braviary, who I use all my rare candies on, because I wanted a Braviary and I wasn't going to go into fighting N with a fucking Rufflet. Now this might sound like I'm advocating for not having the EXP share, but things are a little bit different when I went into Y. I left the EXP share on for most of the game, and then played it the exact same way that I played White. And I did end up overleveled before the 7th gym, so I turned it off for a while. But by the time I got to Victory Road, I was getting pretty overpowered by like Serena and just random normal trainers, so I had to turn it back on. But the last piece of data that completes this analysis is my recent playthrough of Alpha Sapphire, where I never felt the need to turn the EXP share off despite catching all the Pokemon. But this is because I ended up running away from far more random encounters than I ever did in White or Y. There were quite a few times in Alpha Sapphire where if I didn't want to fight a random encounter, I would just not do it, and I never felt like my levels were mismatched. The conclusion that I ended up coming to is that the EXP share is generally well balanced for the games that it's actually in, assuming you don't fight literally every random encounter, which you're not intended to anyway, because there is a run button. If you put the Gen 6 EXP share in the older games, specifically White, it would absolutely break the game. They're just not built for that. But in X and Y and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, if you turn the EXP share off, you would be grinding for a long time. Because those games have levels that are expecting you to have used the EXP share for the whole game. I was surprised when I got to the end of Y, and the max level for the final bosses were 50, because that is not the case in Gen 6. As always, the key takeaway from this is that everyone is stupid and wrong except for me, so that's what we're doing here. But you should get out of here, because the video's over.